Hello and welcome, you guys. My name is Jodie Clark, and I am a part-time lecturer for the Department of Meteorology and Climate Science at San Jose State. I will be walking you through my experience with implementing mastery learning outcomes and specifications grading over the past 9 months, since we did that initial boot camp training where we learned about the teaching method. So first, let me tell you a bit about my course and the breakdown of the course work. The course I adjusted is an online asynchronous GE course where we discuss the science and solutions behind global warming. So it is comprised of 17 learning mastery outcomes, which are divided into these 2 categories. There's 12 science-based learning outcomes, and then 5 economic and policy-based learning outcomes. So the coursework is comprised of multiple short Insta quizzes that students are supposed to take. They range, 5 to 10 points. Basically, after watching a video lecture on a page or 2 video lectures, they take a quiz. And then there's also going to be these large assessment assignments, class discussions, and then the final exam. So what I did is all of the coursework is aligned to these student learning outcomes. So to make life as easy as possible, I used the Canvas outcomes and rubrics. So let's get into more detail about the redesign and the implementation. So I'll be covering the grading scheme, the basics of the student learning outcomes, and particularly go into a breakdown of a student learning outcome. So what's the grading scheme? This is how students can see how to earn the grade that they want in the course. So based on the number of outcomes they master across the semester, they're able to earn a different grade. So for example, to earn a C at the end of the semester, a student needs to successfully have mastered 12 learning outcomes, or you can think of it as like a -5. And so I also try to emphasize to them that this can be any 12 of the 17. It doesn't need to be the first 12. So I decided that the final exam would be graded as kind of a high pass, low pass, no pass, or no attempt situation. So if they got a high pass, they would bump up a mastery level, so they'd go up a grade level. If they had a low pass, they'd stay where they're at. No pass, they'd drop down a mastery level. And then if they did not attempt the final at all, they would drop down 3 mastery levels. So at this point, I also give incentive right here by noting that, if these students can master all 17 of the outcomes along the semester, then they get an A+ in the class and they don't have to take the final exam. So let's dive into the student learning outcomes. So overall, the college has 3 general course learning outcomes, and the department has 4 learning outcomes for this GE course. So I took the material that I teach that met the college and department learning outcomes and created these 17 learning outcomes for the students to master. And then, so these were divided into the 12 learning outcomes, and then there's 5 economic and policy-based learning outcomes. And so these were added in Canvas under outcomes. And this is that region where you define the outcome and set up how you want it to be graded. And then the notes are arbitrary, or sorry, the points are arbitrary. I set it in, right? Because that's the whole point. Points are arbitrary. So I set it up such that the work either meets expectations or it did not. So now all the coursework is aligned to these student learning outcomes. So on the right, the learning mastery gradebook is shown for the test student at the time. And so at the time, when I was kind of going over this, they've mastered 6 learning outcomes, but they'd only gotten up to 9. So at this point, they'd mastered 6 out of 9 learning outcomes. So Canvas has settings such that you can adjust it so that the students can view this gradebook instead of their traditional percentage gradings. So let's just look closer at the science learning outcome 3 to understand why the student hasn't mastered this outcome yet. So this is a breakdown of the 5 alignments that you can see. So the coursework is comprised of 2 short Insta quizzes, a large kind of assessment. I call them these, they're numbered by the learning outcome. And so these are in place of a midterm exam. And then they also have a discussion that they need to contribute to. And then the final exam is also graded on whether or not they had mastered an outcome, but it doesn't go toward the grade, the final grade. It's just kind of for myself. So each alignment is weighted equally toward mastery, but each alignment does not hold that same passing threshold. So students have 3 attempts at the short Insta quizzes to reach at least 80%. And so this student met that for both quizzes. And then the Big Cheese learning outcome assessment, which is in place of midterms, these have varying thresholds, somewhere between 70 to 80%, depending on the assessment, but this student mastered that. So the last one is the discussion, and the discussion they did not master, so they did not meet expectations, so therefore they've not mastered the outcome yet. So as it's a discussion, right, like we're looking for like 100% kind of completion. It's just, it's an open in your opinion, so you should be able to meet the requirements. So if we break this down, we see that the student rubric here, the student is required to respond to a prompt, respond to a peer, and then is it generally well written? And so if all of these have full marks, then they meet the requirement and they meet expectations. So this person did not. So I've written to the student letting them know what they did well and that they still need to respond to a peer to meet expectations. I let them know that they can reach out to me on their journey toward mastery with any questions or concerns that they have. So in general, each alignment has a rubric, and each of these rubrics are aligned to a learning outcome. Other than the quizzes, because you can't really make them a specific amount, these are great. The work is graded as complete or incomplete. And something that I found super helpful is that you can remove your points from the rubric so that the students don't focus on the points. Okay, so this seems like real life and real science, right? If you don't get it fully correct the first time, you gather feedback and you try again to get the result that you want. So what do the students think? Student impact is still a bit hard to judge yet. Taking an online asynchronous class with flexible due dates is not the style for all students. So therefore, I found it hard to gauge whether students which are not accelerating is due to outside reasons other than this method of teaching. So last semester, I had a very small class of 17 students and only 2 provided feedback to the T survey, but the results were positive. This semester with 42 students, I hope to receive some better feedback. So of the students who did not pass the discussion or a learning assessment, many students have taken the provided feedback on how to improve their understanding of the material and have resubmitted it to reach mastery, yet some don't seem to use the opportunity. And whether this is because they don't understand it or they're just choosing not to in a GE class because it's a GE class, it's kind of unknown, right? So without seeing students directly, it is hard to know why, especially when they're unresponsive to communication. So with that in mind, I also made an open discussion over spring break, and a student that is on track to master all 17 outcomes by the end of the spring semester had this remark. So something that they like about the setup of the class is that we are also given multiple attempts to earn the grade we want. So for example, we have 3 attempts on Insta quizzes to achieve a passing score. So learning is more fun for me when I do not have to constantly worry about every missed point that will affect my grade. And I feel like this is a really positive statement about the growth mindset behind the mastery outcomes and specifications grading. So while implementing this style course, I learned to better use the Canvas tools. So my main suggestions are using the grading rubrics, putting in the outcomes, make sure that you're implementing the Learning and Mastery gradebook, and then also hide the percentages from students on the traditional gradebook. Like Again, all these things that we can do to keep them away from the general points of the class that they're used to. Like no points shown on the rubrics. And then just something that's I found helpful overall in teaching on Canvas is utilizing the auto score quizzes and then the question banks. So my next challenge will be next semester implementing this teaching method in a synchronous class online versus an asynchronous class online, because it changes a lot of the dynamics of the class in general. So thanks for listening. And with that, we will be, I guess, passing on and doing questions at the end.